signs. And there are two areas. Artificial or fake divination depends on the skill of the agent only, reading and interpreting certain signs. And then there is the second area, inspirational divination, where the person is under the immediate influence or control of spirits who enable him to discern the future and to utter information that otherwise he would not be able to do. Now, the Bible then has a strict admonition in the Old Testament from Moses, speaking for God, that divination, or of both kinds, both of just the person on a natural basis giving out information, or even under the influence of spirits giving out information, obtaining knowledge of the future or of the immediate present by outward signs, is condemned. Now, I think that at least tells us what the biblical record is saying. That is open for discussion, but let me throw one more other thing on the table here, and that is that I'd like to quote from Bernard Gittleson, who says, "One friend of mine was amazed that on the first visit, her astrologer was able to pinpoint major life events that the astrologer could never have known about, to specific 2-week periods that occurred 20 years before they met. In other words, don't be surprised by what your astrologer knows about you." And Karen, you finally, as a professional astrologer for 12 years, got to a point where you could do some of those things. You never told us what actually you told to some of your clients. But for those people that are just joining us this week, as you actually were a professional astrologer giving information to people, you said that there were 3 bases of astrology. You had rejected the first 2, and you finally hit pay dirt. What was the pay dirt?
It was psychic astrology, and you know, there are many ways to get into this. I was still skeptic enough to reject the kind of religious overtones of my old-fashioned occult buddies, you know, who said these are spirits, and you know, you use them or they use you, and you know, it's kind of a deal you strike. But I was also studying Jungian psychology, and that seemed a very fertile field. As an explanation for astrology, Jungian psychology offers a couple of ideas or theories that if an astrologer latches onto them, utilizes them in work with their clients and work with themselves, you know, it does lead to spirit guide contact, or it does lead to increased DSP, or however you want to phrase it. One of the concepts is synchronicity, and the other is archetype. And if you look at Jung's definition of synchronicity and his book, Collective, which one is this? Structure and Dynamics of the Psyche. He says that this is a principle that connects a psyche, an individual mind, with a physical object, and it is an acausal principle. We're not talking about the planet causing a person to behave this way or to be motivated in this way, but there is still a principle operative there which connects these two. What is it? It manifests itself in meaningful coincidences in time, which astrologers read in their charts. Well, he says that what activates it, that contact, is the archetypal processes in the unconscious. Then you have to ask him, okay, what do you mean by archetypal processes? And you go to his work on archetypes in the unconscious, and archetype is extremely difficult to define. I don't blame him for that, because it's really, you know, it's a concept that does tend to get away from you. There's, first of all, no content in an archetype. There's even very little form. But what an archetype is, it is something that is dynamic, that works in and on the psyche, in and on my mind, to form, well, first of all, it's not even part of my psyche. Okay, so it's like an alien something that's working in and on my psyche. He said it was analogous to the axial system of a crystal, in that it utilizes the material and the content of something else other than itself, like me, my mind and my thoughts, to form out of its own logic, or with its own logic and intention, an image or an idea, which then connects it with the person. Now, if you do archetypal meditation, if you do archetypal work with your clients or in chart reading, if you really try to understand the archetypal images which these planets present, in other words, if you're doing astrology based on, you know, the archetype of Mars, the archetype of Venus, getting in again to the history, no way can you pass off the ancient ideas that these are gods and goddesses who have certain characteristics and requirements of human beings. But that's all put in perspective. You know, it's psychoanalytic jargon. It's not ancient religion. But if you're doing this work, if you go into this over and over again, and if your intention is to gain enlightenment or to gain empowerment through relationship with the archetypes in your own unconscious, and in facilitating this with your client, well, this is the stuff demonic possession is made of. And so what you are doing is you're opening yourself up to this alien intelligence. The Greek word for demon is disembodied intelligence. You know, I'm not talking about devils with horns and stuff. This is simply disembodied intelligence. You know, extraterrestrials. I mean, there's lots of people's theories about what these guys are and, you know, who they are and all the rest of it. The Bible speaks of them as the powers, rulers, and authorities.
All right, next week we're going to find out how this information about spirit guides and spiritism and Carl Gustav Jung and psychology, how this impacts Terry as a scientist who is trying to promote astrology on a scientific basis. And so I hope that you'll join us. Let me ask you this, have you ever looked at a horoscope? Have you ever checked out what the stars are supposed to say about your life for the day? According to some of the statistics I'm reading, 40 million Americans dabble in astrology, and what we're talking about with 5 different people here on the program is astrology credible? What is the scientific evidence? In the last weeks of time, we've started with basic definitions of astrology and then worked into some very interesting things. But let me just give you a shorthand one here. Astrology is the study of the heavens and the influence they exert upon the lives and affairs of humanity. But then we found out that there are some astrologers that they don't use just the basic charts. They have picked up spirit guides along the way, so that a fellow like Stromer in his book says, as we look honestly at astrology, and this is a professional astrologer, we begin to see that adherents of this system, without knowing it, are banging on the door through which communication is established with knowledgeable yet deceptive spirit beings. Eventually that door opens. And that opening produces an appalling development in the adherent's life. He or she matures in the craft in a most unthought of manner as a spirit medium. And Karen, that's basically what happened to you, isn't it?
Well, in actuality, it was a demon, a spirit guide. You know, again, there are many ways to...
And you made promises to your helper.
Yes.
Didn't you? What kind of promises did you make?
Well, I guess they were commitments more than promises, and this entity worked with me for a year and a half, and there were 2 of them, and she was a wonderful spirit guide. She was very loving. The information that she gave me and the ways in which she helped me see my situation, I think, were instrumental in saving my marriage at one point. She gave me much accurate information to help friends. She also helped me to understand that as we are evolving into God, such distinctions as good and evil are inconsequential. Therefore, Christians and people who, you know, are not as far along on the path, such distinctions as truth and falsehood are inconsequential, because God